I think it is on the hour. In fact, it's just 1 minute past the hour. I think we should all welcome Renée. Woo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here and to share a little knowledge with you and hopefully teach you something you didn't know already. We'll see. And hopefully there won't be too many mistakes. I'm going to share, I have a PowerPoint or a keynote thing to share, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. To the uninitiated, you say English clogging, and some folks probably think of the Dutch shoes worn in Holland. Big clunkers that loosely cover the whole foot with wood, in which they clomp around noisily. Sorry. Ask someone if they know of a stage performance with clogging, and some folks of a certain age or background may think of the ballet La Fille Mal Gardée, which has a clog dance in it, as well as a maypole dance. Not to disparage either of these other dances, and while they're similar in some ways, they really don't capture what English clogging looks like. English clog dancing, of course, has its own complex history. If we start with a simple definition, English clogging or clog dancing is a style of percussive dance, meaning a dance that makes noise, that is danced in wooden-soled shoes. It developed in the northern part of England, especially during the Industrial Revolution, which was roughly 1760 to 1840. It likely developed before then, and wooden shoes of various kinds date back to as early as 1230. But the style of English clogging known today is mostly associated with northern England in the 1800s. Clogs were work shoes, originally big solid coverings of all wood, like the Dutch klompen or French sabots, intended to protect the feet while people work. Farm workers, miners, brewers, fishers, and railway workers all wore them. They were durable, insulating, relatively comfortable, and most importantly, cheap. Coal miners wore them as protection from the rough underground conditions, and mill workers wore them in the cotton mills to keep their feet dry, as damp conditions kept cotton threads from breaking. Wearers soon discovered that the knocking of the wood against the floor made a pleasant sound. Plus, ask any young child and they'll tell you, it's fun to clomp around in heavy shoes. Step dancing or clogging developed as the most basic response to hearing music or rhythmic sound. What do most people do when they hear a piece of music? They tap their feet. Step dancing takes it to the next level. People started dancing for many reasons, including as a way to generate heat and to relieve boredom. Mostly, it's something to do while you're standing there watching the machines work. Improvised movements eventually developed into formalized steps and sequences. As the dances became more popular, the clogs became more form-fitting, made with leather uppers that looked more like Oxford-style shoes, sometimes in different complementary colors. The sole is still completely made of wood, usually rounded and curved upward at the toe. Some had pointed toes, useful for fishermen to pull in their nets. Some would have irons, called corkers, nailed to the bottoms to prevent wear and tear and make them last longer. But those would sometimes cause sparks as they hit the street or the factory floor. Dangerous and not ideal for dancing complex rhythms. And the rhythms did, in fact, get quite complicated. Sorry, 1 second. Yes. The rhythms did get quite complicated, and as they moved beyond the basic clomping sound, experimenting with different ways to make noise, like changing your weight just sort of changing weight, using the toe, the ball of the foot, using the tip of the toe, the hip, the tip of the heel, dropping your heel down, all that sort of stuff. You're moving the foot forward, moving the foot backward, both in succession, which is called a shuffle, or a treble sometimes, or a rally sometimes, depending on where you are. And doing little, just sort of playing a little bit with the sounds and how you make them. Also clicking the heels together, clicking the sides of the shoes together, any way to make a sound. The rhythms got sharper and more, whoops, sorry, one second. It's hard to go back and forth. There we go. The rhythms got sharper and more distinct, separating the movements of the heels and toes, and finding variety among the sounds. Dancers created steps that imitated the sound of the different machinery settings. Let's listen to a demonstration from famed clog dancer Pat Tracy, who taught at Pinewoods in 1988 and 89, as she explains this to the BBC radio program Kaleidoscope in 1990.
Pat Tracy, who comes from a long line of Lancashire cloggies.
A lot of the sort of rhythms of the cotton mills come into the steps. You get steps where you get the machinery sound, and steps where you get other bits of machinery coming in, like the weft boxes where they sort of turn over and make a bang. You know, that type of stepping, which all comes from machinery. You get the shuttle. You get the sound as well, both of the loom, and then there's the action of the shuttle at the same time.
The style of clog dancing most familiar today, or at least that I'll be talking about today, developed in the northern part of England, and most of the styles of step dance carry the name of the area they're from. Many steps came from the counties of Lancashire, Northumberland, Durham, and what's now known as Cumbria, which includes Cumberland, Westmoreland, and the northern parts of Yorkshire and Lancashire. J.F. and T.M., that's Joan and Tom Flett, in their book Traditional Step Dancing in Lakeland, talk about the tradition of, quote, a well-defined and bounded area that includes parts of Cumberland, Westmoreland, and that part of Lancashire across the sands of the Morecambe Bay. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, actually. For convenience, we now use the term Lakeland step dancing, but to many people, it will still be known as Westmoreland stepping or Cumberland step dancing, unquote. They also explain that the part of Lancashire included in Cumbria was so physically separated from the main part of Lancashire that I have not referred to any of the stepping as Lancashire, which has a different style. In a fairly general sense, there's a primary difference between the clog dancing from Lancashire and from Lakeland. And I'm going to be honest with you for a bit here. I kind of had we're all friends, right? I've had kind of a crisis of conscience recently in the last year or two, because I actually started dancing so young. I started going to Pinewoods when I was 8 years old and took my first clogging class at Pinewoods when I was 13. And I did not know what I was doing. I didn't know the difference between contra dancing and English then, you know, and I honestly didn't. So, and as I've grown up, I've had to try to figure out what's what and learn the history of it and stuff. And forever and ever, amen, until about a year ago, I think during Zoom, I thought that the style of clogging that I learned was Lancashire hornpipe or Lancashire clogging, when in fact I think it's actually Lakeland clogging. And so it's it's completely like shifted my mindset, and it's just I can't even sort it out in my head. So, and the truth is, I think a lot of the styles kind of mix together and, you know, overlap. And so, you know, there's not always a clear-cut difference, but there is one fairly strong difference. So I was just going to say that, put that out there. My understanding of it now is that Lancashire clog, see, and again, I'm still kind of like, do I have this right? Lancashire clog is often small, close to the floor, and what's called a toe and heel style. Ooh, almost using heel shuffles. So, sorry. So like earlier, I did a shuffle with my toe, try it twice, right? The toe forward, toe back. Here I'm doing heel forward, toe back, heel forward, toe back. And it's not even really a brush. It's more underneath me as opposed to, you know, moving past the floor. So that, I believe, is the Lancashire style, or the heel and toe, right? Whereas the other style, the Northumberland and Durham, is more these big shuffles. Whoops. Yeah, there are some heel and toe in there, obviously, but it's, I think that difference in the shuffling is one of those major differences, as far as my understanding right now. Let's take a look at some better examples. If I share my screen again. Here we go. This is Pat Tracy again.
My grandfather, Henry Nutter, who was born in 1856, learnt to clog dance as a boy. Through him, I know that by 1850, every village had its champion clog dancer. And through the people he knew as a boy, I know that some people were clog dancing in the 1820s. My mother, Sally Nutter, was born in 1899. She and an older brother were taught to dance by my grandfather and other traditional toe and heel dancers. From an early age, she jotted down the steps she learnt, and as an adult, she actively sought out dancers in the locality. She passed on her dancing to me.
So that's a more simple couple of steps from her. So let's see Pat again in a more complex, combination routine. It's a little mind-boggling, isn't it? So fast. Nice to know she can make mistakes too, though. Okay, so now that's the heel and toe Lancashire style, and now let's look at Peter Brown, and he'll do a Northumbrian and Durham step dance. In fact, they're going to introduce him.
Please welcome Peter Brown, accompanied by Brian Jackson. He's got all the stuff on, you can see. Already given a vigorous bit. And together they're going to give us a Northumbrian and Durham step dance. Try and give us a Northumbrian.
I'll talk about the ending of that a little bit more later. By the way, Peter Brown was the first clog teacher I ever had when I was 13 at Pinewoods in 1983. I love him. Even within Lakeland step dancing, Flett talks about two different styles. One is a close to the floor, compact heel and toe style, good for pubs and small spaces, while the other is a little bigger, flashier, with more emphasis on the visual effect that probably originated on a stage. Both improvisation and memorization played a role, and the different styles mingled over time with elements of both in many different traditions. Parts of pub dancing ventured onto the stage too, as the pedestal clog dances, popular in the music hall, are a natural extension of dancing on tabletops or barrels in the pub. The music hall also featured other sometimes silly variety acts, such as trick clog, pantomime, and statue clog. I forgot my... The lines between performance and improv are blurred too, as trading steps turns to competition, sometimes for a pint of beer or a cut of beef. The competition can get fierce, with dancers becoming very protective of their steps and even playing dirty tricks on each other off stage. But as competitions become more formal and frequent, they can also be a good way to earn additional income, not to mention bragging rights, with world championships held every few years. The dancing also moves from busking on street corners for pennies to music hall stages for a decent wage. I'm not sure how much, but with the first documented stage performance as early as 1819, mentioned in Flett. Some dancers cross over between the two, as competitions can be a way for new dancers to break into show business, while established music hall performers can win grand titles in competition, as Dan Leno did in 1883 when he participated in the 6-night Championship of the World of Clog Dancing competition. And you see here he wins this huge belt, kind of like a wrestling belt, I guess. And there are competitions where they sort of put clog dancing alongside wrestling and boxing and other, manly, manly activities like that. So here's Dan Leno. And even Charlie Chaplin danced in music halls as an 11-year-old boy with a group called the Lancashire Lads. Of course, I'm not sure which one of this is Charlie Chaplin here. I can't really recognize him without his tiny mustache. Whoops. Given the cultural and economic ties between the United Kingdom and America and the numbers of people emigrating to the New World, it's perhaps not surprising that the English clog tradition would become popular in America as well. Scholar Rhett Krauss has found documented clog dance performances in Boston, Massachusetts as early as 1845. Just as clog dancing was a big part of music hall performances in England, so too did it take the stage in American minstrel shows, which were created in 1843 by four white men from New York City who called themselves the Virginia Minstrels. I am not going to talk a whole lot about minstrel shows. We all know they're terrible, but they're a part of history. Dancers like Thomas Dartmouth Daddy Rice, who created the character of Jim Crow, Dan Bryant, early exponent of the essence of Old Virginie, the dance that essentially became the soft shoe, and John Diamond, famed early jig dancer who was discovered by circus impresario P.T. Barnum after winning a jig competition, were popular performers in minstrel shows. All three were white men who performed in blackface, making their fortunes off their imitations, sometimes respectfully and sometimes mocking, of African Americans. But the real star of the minstrel show, and the better dancer of all of them, was William Henry Lane, a freeborn black man with the nickname Master Juba. He is often credited as the inventor of tap dance, as he combined English, Irish, and African styles of percussive dance, along with a style of body percussion called patin juba. Similar to ham bone, patin juba is based on the African tradition of slapping different parts of the body, arms, thighs, chest, face, with your hands to make music. It developed as a way for African slaves to communicate with each other after their white owners took away their drums. Charles Dickens wrote about William Henry Lane in his 1842 travelogue, American Notes, which bolstered Lane's popularity. And when Lane went to London in 1848, he was an instant smash. The Illustrated London News asked, quote, how could he tie his legs into such knots and fling them about so recklessly, or make his feet twinkle until you lose sight of them altogether in his energy? The great Dickens immortalized him, and he deserved the glory thus conferred, unquote. John Diamond was Lane's primary rival, and the two challenged each other frequently, continuing the tradition of competition dancing among clog dancers. Though Diamond had beat Lane in a Boston competition in the early 1840s, Lane bested Diamond in a famous New York City competition in 1884 and was billed as, quote, king of all the dancers when he returned to Boston to perform. Records indicate that the early Boston competition may have been the only time Diamond beat Lane. Lane won all the other times. While most professional clog dancers were white adult men, there are some exceptions, including Master Peanut, a 6-year-old boy who danced with the Morris Brothers minstrels in Boston, and a few women cloggers, including Jenny Worrell of the Worrell sisters. One female clog dancer was responsible for an elaborate advertised jig contest, which ran in Boston newspapers over 2 weeks. Julia Morgan, the, quote, champion jig dancer of New York, took out the following ad, as you see here, between May 12th and May 30th, 1862. Quote, having challenged Julia Morgan, having noticed in several New York papers the challenges that have been given by various performers, I now take occasion to propose to T.J. Peele, R.M. Carroll, Hank Mason, E. Bowers, or any other man or female in the country to dance a match, jig, reel, or walk around with me to a stake from $1,000 to $500. This is 1862. Aside, the best dancer to take the stakes, the contest to be decided by the audience at the National Theater. Contest decided by the audience, that always makes me curious. Boston dancer Naomi Porter accepted the challenge on June 2nd, and the two squared off over 10 days of competition, though there was no announcement in the papers about a winner. Whether that amount of money was awarded, if someone won, it was probably good advertisement for their minstrel companies. The formal competitions were often judged by several people, each responsible for different criteria. In his book, English Clog Dance Steps, Hornpipe, Waltz, and Reel, Tony Barrand, talks about the Northern Counties Clog Dancing Championships, which started up again in 1976 after a 20-year absence, and were part of the Durham City Folk Festivals. The championships were the brainchild of Mary Elwood Jameson, 3-time champion in the 1950s, and at least the third generation of a clog dancing family after her father, Johnson Elwood, and his father, Jimmy Elwood. Barrand explains that the championships were judged on 4 categories: time, beat, carriage, and execution, and each category is scored by a different judge. Time is judged by the rhythmic, quote, rhythmic correctness of the sounds made by the clogs. Beat refers to the evenness of the relative sounds produced by the different parts of the clog in relation to the floor or pedestal, as was required at the competition. Barrand also specifies that ideally all sounds should be roughly the same volume. Carriage, of course, refers to the way dancers hold their upper bodies, which should be quiet, the arms not swinging at all. Execution, which Barrand says is basically a difficulty factor. The more beats and complex rhythms you produce cleanly, the higher your potential score. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Competitors were also required to dance on a 2-foot square pedestal, and of course you lose points if you fall off. The steps correspond to different rhythms and musical genres, with the most common being hornpipe, waltz, and reel, as the subtitle of Barrand's book suggests. There are also occasional jigs and even a soft shoe, yes, in clogs, in the 20th century, but waltzes and hornpipes were more common. Barrand also mentions that the English tradition doesn't really have reels per se. The steps technically belong being danced to polka music, but they're called reels because they're set dances where the dancers execute a Scottish reel figure, a hay in English dancing, weaving in and out between each other. So here is Cumberland Reel for 4. as the reel also. So that was a Cumberland reel for 4. Beginner or novice dancers start on a raised platform in this competition rather than a pedestal and would naturally dance easier steps with more spaces in between the sounds. As dancers develop in skill and execution, they begin to add more complex rhythms, filling in missing spaces with additional beats and sounds. There we go. And I'm just going to show you sort of a little example. By the way, I'm just going to mention that I'm not actually looking at the chat. I see there are things happening in the chat, and I'm not looking because I'm just... So if you have questions, save them, and I will get to them eventually. And I hope to read the chat afterward. Anyway, so yes, beginners would start with simpler steps, obviously, which would have more spaces within them. And then as you get more complicated, you kind of fill those spaces with extra sounds. So for example, a very simple example, the waltz clog is danced, of course, in 3/4 time, to music in 3/4 time. So the rhythm is a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3. The basic step, it's called the introduction. And it's just a step, shuffle, step, step. 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, right? So you hear that there's that little pause at the end. 1 and 2 and 3 and, 1 and 2 and 3 and. But if I wanted to, I could fill that little space with another sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and, 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 right? So that just kind of makes it a little more complicated. To give you another little more complex example, there's a step called Swanee, both in hornpipe or in waltz and reel, that looks like this. Step, heel, step, right? And I could do it that simple sort of open rhythm, 1, a 2, 3, a 4, 5, a 6, a 7, 8. Or, as I get more skilled, I can fill those extra little sounds with beats. 1 and a 2, a 3 and a 4. And so on. So you can kind of fill in those extra little sounds as you go, right? And so that's where you get into execution and more difficulty, and as you sort of move up the ladder. So, parts of keeping the sound clean was built into the style of the dancing itself. English clogging, especially as it differs from Appalachian clogging. In fact, often they'll say English clog dancers, as opposed to Appalachian or American cloggers or flat-footing. English style is danced on the balls of the feet. And you don't want to let your heels drop unless it's a deliberate sound, unless you're making a deliberate sound with your heel. In fact, many competitions would have a judge sitting underneath the stage, counting the rhythms and listening for the sounds of the heels, ready to subtract points in the case of an errant or unintentional heel drop. Fortunately, though, the shoes, right? I mentioned that upward curve in the toe. Those help you stay up on the balls of your feet and keep your weight forward. So, in terms of the structure, waltz steps are usually danced in 16-bar phrases, with the introduction, that little intro, basic step that I showed you, as two bars, and then a different step, usually on the right and left, for the next 2 bars. Then you repeat that a bunch of times, 3 times basically, until you have 12 bars. And then you have what's called the break, or the shuffle off, for the last 2 bars. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you have your introduction, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3, and then you have a step, whatever it is. Of course, you do that again. 3rd time. Then you do the intro again, and something different, which is your break. And so that's how your waltz clog is sort of built in the structure. And then obviously you do different steps each time. The hornpipe has a similar structure, but it's an 8-bar phrases, with the step itself being 1 or 2 measures long, repeated, sometimes with a little bit shortened, and then also finishing those last 2 last 2 measures in your break, the shuffle off. So I'll show you just a little bit of what the hornpipe looks like. Da, 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 da. So we got 4, 5, 6, that's the step, and break. And then you would repeat it on the other foot, and so on, yeah? So you do, usually in competition, you would do 10 or 12 steps, sometimes as many as 20, and each step, which seems like a lot, and each step was usually done on the right foot and then repeated on the left foot in that same structure with the 6 bars and then the 2-bar shuffle off or break. And you can change the break, it doesn't have to be the same one every time. The hornpipe also always ended with what's called a double shuffle, which looks like this. Step shuffle, hop shuffle, step shuffle, hop shuffle, step shuffle, hop shuffle. So they always end up with that, and often they'll try to get it faster the last time through. And then the break, hopefully a little cleaner than that. And so when we watched Peter Brown earlier at the end, that's what he was doing when it sped up. Those were the double shuffles. So, let's watch, let's see. Do we have time? Can we watch another one? Yeah, okay. Why hear me yap when we can watch cool dancing? All right, so first we'll watch a waltz clog. This is Alex Woodcock dancing. He's so fun, and he's got much more of a sort of swinging, almost modern jazzy kind of style, showmanship, sort of thing. So I wonder how traditional some of that is, but.
And up next, an old favorite, a great favorite of ours since he's been in the United States, accompanied by Mr. Paul Earwicker. Would you please welcome at least 1 and maybe 2 people? Just 1. It's the great, the one, the only. Mr. Alex Woodcock.
So that's Alex Woodcock. And now let's watch, I guess, a little bit of, this is Tony Barron dancing hornpipe, and watch for those double shuffles at the end that I told you. So he didn't speed up at the end. By the way, if you notice the outfit he was wearing, and Peter Brown was also wearing, that's a very traditional clog dancing outfit, especially for the 19th century, with the blouse, the sort of fancy blouse, a waist sash, and then breeches, knee breeches, and socks. Usually the breeches were very, very, very elaborate and embroidered. Time is flying so fast that I am gonna jump ahead, and I had so much prepared, actually.
Well, we have until 15:15, I believe. So you've got.
True. Although I'd like to
take some questions too. Yeah.
Exactly. I want to have time for questions if there are any. But so here is just a little of what I'm talking about with the outfits. You see how fancy their knickers are. They're their breeches are very fanciful, elaborate embroidery on there. And
are you able to share your screen again?
Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
can't see that. That's okay.
That's important. That's better, I hope. So, very elaborate breeches. And this, by the way, this is William Delahanty and Thomas Hengler, who were one of the more popular duos of the 19th century in the minstrel shows. And they were on this cover. This picture, obviously, is on the cover of this book, Clog Dancing Made Easy, which was from 1874. And I actually have a copy of it here, which I don't even know it's in this. I don't even know how I got it. But somehow, it's tiny. I have this book. And I'm afraid to touch it, but I just did. Anyway, it's from 1874. But Delahanty and Hengler were so popular and so in demand that competing minstrel shows tried to contract them, and it ended up in bloodshed when the two managers or owners of the two different competing minstrel show companies had a little gunfight over who these guys were going to dance with. And one manager ended up killing the brother of the other one before getting wounded himself. It was quite dramatic. Let's see. There's another picture of that outfit and another manual from the time. This is around the same time, 1870 something, I forget exactly. By the way, the hornpipe, as you can hear, is not the same as the hornpipe that's popular in or common in a lot of English country dances, the 3-2, hornpipes, like Dusty Miller, right? And I'm just gonna go back. There's Dusty Miller. 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1. This hornpipe that I'm talking about now is is that dotted hornpipe. Yum buddy da dum buddy da dum da dee da dum, right? But there are actually books of music from the late 1760s, I believe, that have hornpipes. They're all hornpipes, but they're all in different rhythms, from 3-2 to common time to even 6-4. So it just seems to be kind of a common name for dances, I guess. I've been trying to figure out how the two very different styles ended up with the same name, and I think they just reused the name. So there's that. The hornpipe. The sailor's hornpipe in particular, John Durang, as you can see here, was, first of all, he was considered the first American-born man to become known, widely recognized as a professional dancer in America. And he danced the sailor's hornpipe, what's called the sailor's hornpipe, which many people are familiar with. It often has this sort of, especially in Scottish dance, this kind of pantomimic movements. His hornpipe seems a little different though, and it's a weird kind of mishmash of steps, of different kinds of steps. His son, Charles Durang, was a dance master in the Victorian era, the middle 1800s, and he wrote a few different dance manuals, the Fashionable Dancer's Casket and things like that. And he wrote this book, The Ballroom Bijou, where he put the steps of his father, John Durang's sailor's hornpipe. And if you can see, it has steps like glissade, round. It has sort of ballet steps like glissade, sisson, entrechat, right? Down here. But it also has weird shuffling steps like the double shuffle down and the heel and toe back and cut the buckle. So it's this very strange, and even the pigeon wing. So it's this very strange kind of mix of things. It was likely danced in soft shoe, in slippers, not in clogs, not in hard shoes, but it's kind of related to this because it's sort of the first soft shoe dance, especially when he also did this. Whoops, this egg dance, which was a sort of an Easter game where you try to either dance, or you put eggs on the floor and dance around them without breaking them. Or if you see in the second painting over here, there's like a circle on the floor. This is a very small circle, but you try to knock the egg out of this bowl and then knock the bowl onto the egg without breaking it, and while keeping in the circle. And John Durang kind of combined that egg dance with a hornpipe, where he supposedly danced on 13 eggs blindfolded without breaking any one. I'm sure he danced around them, not on them, but that's what it says. So, and then in this Lakeland book, this traditional step dancing in Lakeland, they had these ball programs in the back. These were juvenile balls or finishing balls, which were balls for the students and their parents, I think, where the students can show off what they learned. And there you can see this also has a number of things. This is from 1863. I'm pointing it as if you can see, but this is from 1863, and there's a number of different dances here. It's a combination. There's some things, there's popular Victorian ballroom dances like waltz, polka, schottische, varsovienne, but there's also mazurka possibly, but there's also a number of hornpipes, and those are mostly by solos or duos, and those are the students doing their exhibition dances. Then there's also a couple of odd sort of high dances like the Highland Fling, and there's always almost always a sailor's hornpipe. And most of these hornpipes were actually done in hard shoes, leather-soled shoes, but not clogs. If it says clog hornpipe, which there might be one on there, then those are danced in clogs. So there's a difference between step dancing, which is usually in those hard shoes but not clogs, versus clog dancing. And now we're here. Oh yes. So I'm going to keep going, I guess. As we got into the 20th century, some of the clog dancing started to get a little bit of a reputation. Clogs are related to, as I said earlier, they're cheap. They're cheaply made, and so it became sort of associated with the poor and working class, and people wanted to distance themselves from that. So, especially as jazz and tap dancing came in, and all these other sort of new mixes of dances came in, people kind of stepped away from clogging a little bit, but obviously there is still clogging done. And one of the most famous tap dancers, and I think he's called the father of tap or the grandfather of tap, I forget, is Bill Bojangles Robinson, who is amazing, and I love him. He does I'm going to show a clip from him, because he does a very English style form of tap dance. It's very, very clearly based on English clogging, and he wears wooden shoes. He was one of the few tap dancers who still wore wooden shoes. They were not clogs; they were split-soled, where the heel and the toe were attached by leather. But they're still wooden shoes, and in this case, the clip I'm going to show you, I actually wonder if they were. It does seem like it's maybe a full solid base, but not a clog, and you can see in this video. So I'm going to play this. I believe this is from King for a Day, but I'm not positive.
Ladies and gentlemen, you all know that boy of Mr. Tapley's. Well, I just found him out in the kitchen, and during this intermission, he's going to entertain you. Come on out, Wash.
Did you see those wooden shoes? I think it's so cool. I love it. By the way, he was already around 50 years old by the time he reached any sort of stardom. So I'm not sure exactly how old he was there, but probably around that, which makes me feel very sad. But anyway, I'm going to talk for a few more minutes about the Marley family. Of course, in 1988, Rhett Krause, who I mentioned earlier, discovered that his neighbors, the people who he lived next door to for most of his life, were a dancing family, an English clog dancing family specifically, and he never knew until 1988 when he found out. The direct neighbor didn't know any of the steps. His name was Dan Marley because he apparently held his arms out when he should have had them down. But his sister Anna, who lived in the next town over, knew all the steps and remembered them and was happy to teach them. So Rhett told Tony Barron, and Tony told his student Kari Smith, and they got together with Anna and learned a number of these steps from her. Her father, William Marley, as you see here, was a clog dancer, and he had a duo with William Professor Farley. So they were Marley and Farley, and they danced in the 1890s together, doing a lot of these clog dance steps, and including some, they had a pedestal clog, and they had a buck and wing, what's called a buck and wing, which is a fast reel in this case. When William got married, he had 8 children. Anna was one of the 8, and he moved with his wife and family to. He was born in Massachusetts, and he moved to Rockville, Connecticut, where they lived the rest of their lives, I believe. And Anna still lived there. Sorry. Farley decided they were together until 1915, but Farley left and went back home and retired and went back to working as a barber. And so William continued to dance with his son, his oldest son, Jim Marley. Actually not oldest, second oldest, I think. And they had a group called the Dancing Marleys, or Marley and Son. Sometimes it was a father and son group. And then it developed or expanded into incorporating the whole family. Oh yes, that's right. So the shoes that you can see here, he also had, similar to Bill Robinson's, these kind of regular shoes. He had clogs, but he also had regular shoes, but with wood taps or wood soles. But so they expanded the family into to incorporate almost all of the 8 children and his wife. His wife and 2 of the children played music for them, and then the other 5, I think, danced. And you can see here the 3 youngest Gert and Anna and Maddie dancing. And then the other two teenage girls refused to do it. They didn't want to do it. And in fact, Gert was very relieved. So the Dancing Marleys as a family danced until 1929 when William died. And then after he died, Gert was more than happy to hang up her shoes. She was done. But Anna and Jim were not. They wanted to keep going. They were dance zealots. And so they continued performing together from 1929 until 1936. In 1936, they auditioned for the Major Bowes Amateur Hour, which was a kind of a rags to riches stories of ways for people to kind of break out and become stars, or to some degree anyway. And they went on tour with the Major Bowes unit, touring a number of different vaudeville houses across America, doing 4 shows a day, touring on the road for 178 days, which is a lot. And then they came home. They weren't much richer, but they they were more professional dancers and more widely recognized. A little bit of celebrity, and then but that's right. Major Bowes actually offered them to. By the way, Jim was 35 when they auditioned in that picture. Oops, sorry. This picture. Jim is 35, and Anna here is only 19. I think just barely 19. And then the next year, Major Bowes wanted them to tour with him again in England, but Jim Marley canceled at the last minute. And Anna, who was still only 19, her family basically persuaded her that they didn't want her to go alone. So she didn't go. She did dance with him with Major Bowes one more time, solo, I believe, but she wasn't able to go. And so they both went back to working at the mill. The local mill in Rockville. But Bill Robinson, who I mentioned earlier, was in the audience at this Major Bowes performance, and they have a step, which is a step, click, heel thing that is called the Robinson Roll. And then Anna opened a dance school where she taught for 40 years in Rockville, from 1946 to 1986, often with most of the town were students, including her nieces and her great nieces, as you can see here. So she kept going. And then 2 years, just 2 or 3 years after she closed her school, Tony Barron met her and made her teach them. And Tony also formed a company called the New Dancing Marleys. As you see here, this is in 1995, and that is me on the far left. So along with Margaret Keller, Tony Barron, Margaret Dale Barron, his wife, Meg Ryan, Kari Smith, and Laura Robertson. Laura was at Heydays the last time we had Heydays. So, and I just want to show you this. This is Anna Marley in 1988, 1990, where she's in her 80s, showing Tony a little bit of their pedestal clog.
Play it again.
I'll show you got it.
Practice that. Play it again, Sam.
So that's Anna. She's a Spitfire. I've met her a couple of times, and it was amazing. She passed away in 2000, but she was incredible. I have so many more videos to show you, and I'd be happy to show you, but we only have a few minutes left. So I would love to take questions or thank you for joining me. Would you like to ask some questions, or would you rather see another video?
Oh, I just want tell them about how you're teaching online.
Oh, okay. Is that Suzanne? Thank you. Yeah, I've been teaching online during Zoom. I haven't, it's been a month or two since I've taught the last class, but I taught 3 or 4 different classes in what I thought was Lancashire Clog, so I apologize, Suzanne, but I think it was actually Durham, Northumberland Clog. And then in some of the Marley, the Marley Waltz Clog so far, and I will eventually do the Buck and Wing, probably, and maybe the Soft Shoe. So Marleys have a number of routines, at least 8 or 10, including Soft Shoe, Buck and Wing, Pedestal, which I don't actually know, Military, a jump rope clog, which is so hard. I've gotten through it in the past, but it's very difficult. And I've forgotten what I've said already, so there's more.
James
yes.
has a hand up.
Yes, I see that. James, hi.
Hello. This is a question I put into the chat, and maybe you can address it directly. When you were talking about in performance, they would do a certain routines leading with the right foot, then they'd do the same routine leading with the left. Were there left-footed cloggers who started with the left and went to the right, or did you always have to start on the right?
That is an excellent question. I've actually never thought about that. I don't know. If Alex or you or anybody else knows, please chime in. First of all, I think that's more for competition anyway, because we've certainly done routines where you don't repeat it on the left, and it can get kind of dull depending on the step. So you don't always have to repeat it on the other foot. But I would guess that especially in competition they would insist that everybody do it the same way, because that's sort of what happens with competition anyway, is that things get codified and standardized. So that's my guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
Darlene has just put wondering if you'll be able to see the recording again later. I know it's been recorded now and it's been uploaded to the cloud, but I believe so, right?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I admit I was occasionally looking at people's faces, so I don't know if they would have shown up on the video, but not often. So yeah, that's fine with me.
Chip.
Yeah.
This is not a question, just a comment that I'm thrilled to see so much about the early history of clogging, which I knew nothing about, and then the connection from Britain to the States, and then through Bojangles and the Marleys, and going right up to you. So this is kind of like your clogging genealogy.
Yeah, right.
As it were, and yeah, it's really cool to see that connection. This is all new to me, so it's very
awesome.
Fun in a historical way.
Glad to hear it. Then you won't know if I said anything wrong. Thank you. Yeah, it is really fun, and it's really cool to sort of see. And there's other dancers, you know, I have so many videos that I'd love to show too, because there's so many, and they're all mostly, you know, widely available on YouTube, a lot of on YouTube, and then some other places that I could point you to if you're interested. Chris Brady has an amazing website. There's something called InStep RT, which does not stand for retweet. It stands for retread. I forget what it stands for. Anyway, InStep RT. They have a number of things. So there's so much out there. Darlene, thank you, Chip.
I did a question I posted in the chat earlier. It looks like clogging is what we call a living tradition, where it's changing and growing. And Chip, I just wanted to clarify that, because when you showed the more modern dancers, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I had something about that written where it especially with Anna, you know, well, she's not living anymore, but at the time, there was always this question, especially because she taught at her dance school for so many years, 40 years, and doing some of the clog dancing, but also creating new routines, creating tap routines. They were good. She was good about, you know, changing things to meet what was popular at the time or whatever. So there's always the question of whether what she taught was really traditional and something that they did in the 1890s, or whether it wasn't. But you can see, as you see with Bojangles, Bill Robinson, he starts out with the exact same waltz step that I showed you here, you know, and then deviates from there. So you know, there is the question of whether, you know, how authentic it was. But yes, it's a living tradition, which means that what they say now is what it is. So
it's two modern dancers in the UK that in English Clog that I would recommend checking out because they are awesome. If you don't know them already, Renée, you probably know who they are, but for others as well, Tiny Taylor, who is an incredible dancer who dances a lot with a show called The Demon Barbers or the Lock-In Theatre Show, and she is absolutely incredible. And also Hannah James, who actually does a whole show called Jig Doll, which involves a lot of modern clog dancing mixed in with other types of dance, and she is phenomenal. Awesome. So Hannah James has a lot of really beautifully filmed stuff that you can go and check out. She's amazing. Yes, Darlene.
I don't know them. I have to look them up. There was a video I was hoping to show by Laura, and of course I'm blanking on her last name now, but it just
Connolly.
She just starts. It's just like mind blowing. I wish I could play just a little bit of it because it's kind of like this false security. The fiddle sets up a very false sense of security where it's la da dee da 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 dee da da. And what I was saying before about how you know as you get more complex you can put more things in there. He's going la da dee da 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 da, and then she goes and it's just amazing. It's mind blowing. So
there's if you search online for like Newcastle clog dance flash mob.
Yeah. Oh yes.
That's one of the things she's done, and it's incredible. And they do this modern clog dancing on top of barrels, and like have a whole big flash mob of people. Thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It occurs to me that I have a whole playlist that I've been keeping, so I will put that in the chat. I'll put the link for it in the chat, and you can watch it on your own. It's not from that same recording, but it's just mind blowing. It's so fun.
All right. Well, it is time to wrap up, but there are things in this whole Heydays virtual thing. There are the hangout rooms, the social rooms, whatever you want to call them, breakout rooms where you can go and hang out. So we can totally go at some point this weekend and we can have more clog nerding. That'll be great. But let's all just unmute momentarily just to give Renée a round of applause for such an incredible talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is really